Hello, and welcome to the first installment on a series on how to process shadow work and integrate your shadows. I'm here today with Chase, and we're going to discuss the basic prerequisites that you'll need to do before processing shadow work for yourself or for someone else. So let's look at the material we have. So before we get started, I'm going to explain the process that I currently use. The shadow work integration process for me is an ever evolving process. I'm continuously adding new things or adjusting things, seeing what works, what doesn't. I kind of like to poke things with sticks and see how it goes. I run experiments all the time. This is my current shadow work process, and it will probably change in the next few weeks or the next few months. But this is the best method that I found to date. This is not the only way to process shadow work by any means. This is the method that I'm using, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the best method for you. I would encourage you to take what resonates, adapt whatever needs to be adapted to suit your individual needs, and above always, please always trust your own discernment.
So what is shadow work?
I get this question a lot. So, shadow work for me is the most efficient vehicle for enacting lasting change in your life, anyone's life. I've spent a lot of time personally in therapy, recovering from personal traumas. I spent 10, 12 years as a psychiatric registered nurse. Took partway through my master's degree for professional counseling. I've read dozens of self-help books. I've enrolled in mentorship programs. Everything a normal person who is trying to heal from trauma does. I have done all of those things, and all of that added together did not enact even a portion, a fraction of the amount of change that I've been able to achieve using shadow work in my own life in the last couple of years. Simply put, shadow work is understanding and reprogramming your body's software to heal your DNA, and basically, if you want to use a programming analogy, it defragment your hard drives. Shadow work requires uncovering the aspects of yourself that you've hidden away, things that you've deemed unacceptable, things that other people might have told you were too much to handle. Shadows are the parts of yourself that you've split off and locked away, the parts that you wish didn't exist, the aspects of yourself that you've thrown into the void or hidden away. Your shadows are the compartmentalized aspects of yourself that you've created in this life. And the integration process is the process of reintegrating those parts of yourself that you've held separated.
So when are shadows generated or created?
Sometimes shadows are created unintentionally, sometimes they're created intentionally. Most often, these will occur. They occur throughout our lifetime. They can be created when we feel so-called negative emotions like shame, rejection, being unacceptable, feeling physically unsafe, feeling unloved, overwhelmed. Sometimes it occurs when our ego or our mind feels threatened. The instances of shadow work can occur when we're overwhelmed by intense emotions and during circumstances when we feel like we are feeling too much and we don't know what to do with the emotional excess, so we will store it as part of our shadow self. Other times there's kind of a unique set of circumstances that occurs sometimes when our internal map is too far from what our soul's original DNA blueprint looks like when we're living a life that is too far outside of who we are at a soul level and who we were created to be. This creates an emotional and energetic mismatch, dissonance between who we think we should be and who we actually are. And all that excess energy has to go somewhere. So a lot of times that will be stored as portions of shadow self. The process for integration is fairly simple and easy to follow. It involves following the emotions that emerge during prompting, either prompting yourself or having someone else prompt you during a shadow integration session. And what the entire process, what the goal is to uncover the root fear that created or instigated the creation of this box of unacceptable self that we created. Once you find the root fear statement, can begin the integration process. So it starts with identification and awareness. That's always the first step.
So why should we do shadow work integration?
So we process our shadows for lots of different reasons. It should be a personally motivated process. You shouldn't do it for someone else or because someone else tells you you should. It should be something that you choose on your own to do. When we process our shadows, when we integrate them back into the whole, it helps us increase our awareness of who we are at a soul level, at a DNA level. It can also help us heal past wounds and intense traumas. It can help us heal PTSD. And it allows you to enact lasting change in your life, like I talked about. This is the best vehicle that I've found to help you manifest and live the life that you truly want. So this is a highly intuitive process. It requires some basic skills that we all possess, but most of us will need to develop. It's kind of like going to the gym or taking a class or honing your artistic skills. The practice of developing your psychic skills in itself isn't very difficult. And honestly, most people find it pretty enjoyable. These are not special skills. So I'm sure you've probably heard some people say, oh, well, I'm a psychic. Or, make it sound all mystical and mysterious, like it's some sort of endowed gift. It's my honest belief that everyone, all human beings, have the ability to tap into these natural senses. We are all psychic. We are all empaths. Some people just have honed these skills to a sharper degree. Many of us learn to do that as a coping mechanism or a survival tactic during periods of intense abuse or trauma. And other people, have just learned to repress these natural abilities. Now, I'm not going to ask you to read minds or levitate or do anything wacky. We're simply talking about the basics of tapping into your own energetic system to obtain basic knowledge that's available to everyone. All things are connected through an unseen energetic network, a lot like in the movie Avatar. We're all connected to each other and to the universe energetically, unless you've chosen to unplug your DNA blueprint from source. And some people will choose to do this through repetitive negative life choices or through consciously deciding to follow a left hand or dark path consistently. However, these individuals have little to no interest in integrating their shadows, so you're probably not going to encounter them in this process, and that's not really a concern. Most children exhibit naturally these intuitive gifts and senses and skill set that we're going to talk about until they're taught to repress them or suppress them. And you'll see this a lot in kids as you watch them play and use their imagination. And children are very intuitive. Reawakening these abilities, however, as an adult takes a little bit of practice. But you probably use these senses to some degree subconsciously, even if you haven't attempted to reawaken them. Sometimes you might know when a loved one is hurt or they need you. You might know when someone is staring at you without actually knowing physically that they're looking at you. Sometimes you can be aware a dangerous situation a few seconds before it actually occurs. It might be something as simple as thinking that you need some obscure item before you leave the house, only to find that you do in fact need it later in the day. Some people have dreams that sometimes come true. All of these types of occurrences are you using your natural innate energetic senses. And in my opinion, normal is overrated. No one really likes being a muggle. So I would encourage everyone to embrace your spidey senses. They serve you well.
So, what skills do I need to know before I start doing shadow work on myself or somebody else?
So there are some basic prerequisite skill sets that are going to come in handy before you do the shadow work process. And those are some things like intuition, discernment, knowing how to communicate with your guides, and knowing how to communicate with your higher self. We do have videos that help you learn how to tap into these abilities and hone those skills if you're unaware of how to do that.
Why do we need to connect to our higher selves before or during this process?
So in this third density in Earth, where we're currently experiencing this reality, duality exists. It's just a fact of life. It's a part of the set of natural laws that govern the experience on this plane. So to explain that, like it or not, we live in a dualistic world. Others are going to judge you for your actions. Some things are always going to be taboo. People will try to convince you that their set of rules is the one that you should follow. It's all just part of life here on the third rock from the sun. Duality defines right and wrong for us, good versus evil, but it also creates separation. So, in that sense, duality makes it very difficult to objectively process your shadows. That's why we utilize a method that we're teaching today of shadow integration that incorporates processing the energy in the fifth dimension, not the third, in an area that is outside of duality. So, your higher self, when we connect to our higher self, this provides a connection to a higher vibrational state. As your vibration rises, you're able to easily move between higher densities or dimensions. Each density has its own set of natural laws and vibrational states, and beyond the fourth density, lower vibrational beings they're just not found because the vibration is simply too much of a mismatch for them in their lower vibrational state. And it's physically excruciatingly painful for them to attempt to stay in reality with a dissonant vibration. So if you're new to vibrational matching, we have a video that explains this in more depth called Vibrational Matching and Authentic Shadow Work. And Chase is actually really knowledgeable in this area, so he can help answer some questions about that if you have any. But duality doesn't exist in the fifth density and beyond, so that's why we choose to work and process shadows in the fifth density. If you've ever worked with angelic beings, angels, Elohim, or some ascended masters, you've received firsthand experience on how a non-duality framework operates. Many of these higher dimensional beings come into your awareness and your experience because they volunteered as guides. And a lot of them will do this simply to study and experience secondhand the principles of duality here on Earth because it's a foreign concept for them in their present state. And honestly, they're fascinated by it. But it's also important to remember that there is not a need for protection in the fifth density and beyond because those lower vibrational beings that our ego tells us that we need to be protected from simply don't exist. So the only thing you would need protection from during the shadow work process is going to be yourself.
Why do I need to develop my own discernment?
So discernment is an important concept. I think discernment is something that is seriously lacking in today's culture. We have book smarts, we have street smarts. Very few people ever take the time to develop their discernment. Discernment allows you to hear your own soul song and determine your own personal truth. It also allows you to identify faulty programming, and all of those things are crucial during the shadow integration process. Learning to hear your own truth, your own voice amidst the chaotic din of the world is one of the most valuable gifts that you can give yourself.
What is victim mentality?
So, victim mentality is a topic that I could probably do an entire 2 hour long video on. We can just talk about that particular topic for a really long time. But I'm just going to hit the high points. In my experience, victim mentality is a rampant problem in our society. We all want to place blame for everything that's wrong in life on someone or something else, and that's socially acceptable for us. It's always someone else's fault, and we'll just laugh it off. It's not a big deal. Victim mentality is the belief that things happen to us and not for us. So I'm going to say that again. It's a belief that things happen to us, not for us. It's a faulty thought process that at its root says, I am not the author of my own story. I'm not responsible. And therefore, it's out of my control. So here's the problem with that belief. You can't change that which you refuse to own. And in this density, in this reality, in this experience, humans are all born with free will. And we're all co-creators in this reality. We're born with the ability to manifest and create. But a lot of times we simply choose to give that power away by refusing to take responsibility for our own choices, actions, and outcomes because it's easier. So, and why else would we do this? Why would you choose to give away your own personal power? In a lot of cases, it's just socially acceptable. It's patterned behavior. It's what we've learned to do. It's part of an ego program that allows us to hold the illusion of self-protection. And notice I said illusion. If we don't own it, we don't have to change it. We're not responsible. We're not held accountable. And oftentimes we really don't want to put in the work required for change, even when we say we do. And for many people, this can also be an issue of self-worth. We believe others have power over us. We believe others know better than we do. We trust the judgment and decisions of other people more than we do our own. In some cases, you might be afraid of conflict or rejection, so we give away our power as an act of people-pleasing or as part of an attempt to earn purpose or love or self-value. But the problem with that is these tactics never, and I mean never, achieve the results intended. It goes against natural law, and it's a perversion of how humans are meant to function and create naturally. And the funny thing is once you learn to begin being aware of victim mentality, you'll find these statements hidden absolutely everywhere. You find them in song lyrics and TV shows and advertising and political propaganda and books and movies and memes and in casual conversation around the dinner table with your friends and family and neighbors. So some examples that you might recognize are fill in the blank statements like my mother did blank, so I do this. Fill in the blank. It's in my DNA. I'm 100% that bitch. I can't help it. It's just the way I am. My father was never around growing up, so I sleep around to feel loved by men. How many times do you see that played out in real life? My parents were emotionally unavailable, so I'm needy and it ruins all my relationships. I was abused. It's not my fault I'm fat. I just really like food. The way I was raised was devoid of compassion, so you're just going to have to suck it up. I've been hurt in every other romantic relationship, so I don't trust anyone now. I'm unlucky in love. I'm only attracted to bad boys. It's just my type. This is one of my favorites. The universe sent me a bad day. Or how about the universe doesn't send you what you want. It sends you what you need. Subtle victim mentality is everywhere. And it's important to remember that you cannot change that which you do not own. Responsibility always begins, it's always the beginning step before lasting change.
So, how do I identify victim mentality when processing shadow work?
There are two main markers that you're going to notice that are going to be clues that you're dealing with a loss of personal power. And those are always blame and justification for behavior. And the funny thing is the impact of victim mentality is absolutely staggering. It's not really funny. It's unusual that it goes so unnoticed in our society. It's normal for it to be overlooked. Because if you refuse to own this experience, all of it, every aspect of your human experience in this lifetime, you're actively giving your personal power away. It feels like a passive activity, but it's not. You are actively choosing to give it away by refusing to accept responsibility. Failure to take responsibility results in this pattern that I'm sure a lot of you will recognize. It results in powerlessness and helplessness and being stuck in the same crappy behavior loops over and over. And that's because you simply cannot change what you don't own. So we've been going car shopping a lot lately, right? So if I go with you onto a car lot and I decide to paint some random car blue with gold stars because I think it would look better in blue with gold stars than the boring black that it is now, can I just walk in and do that? You don't want a blue and star colored car? No, I can't do that because that's not my car. I don't own it. I have no authority to decide what color it should or shouldn't be. So along that same principle, if you're blaming your behavior, your thoughts, your actions, your outcomes, your past, your current situation, your lack of movement and growth, any of those things, if you're blaming those things on anyone or anything, you're giving your power away. If you're using someone else's behavior or a certain event or circumstance in your life to justify your own behavior, actions, thoughts, or outcomes, you're giving your power away. If you're refusing to make your own choices and determine your own truth, even if that's due to fear of failure or fear of being wrong or because of some people-pleasing behavior that you're trying to carry out or some other noble cause, you're still actively giving your power away. Lack of personal power is a common and gigantic block to clearing and integrating shadow work. Learning to recognize it for this purpose is just absolutely crucial. If you're still holding on to victim statements surrounding your own shadows, you will not be able to integrate them successfully. If I'm working with someone during a shadow session and they refuse to let go of victimization, the session simply ends right then and there.
What is duality and how does it play into the shadow integration process?
So, when we're talking about duality, it's important to understand how energy works, how it proceeds in terms of natural laws. So, when we're doing any energy work at all, your intention is always reflected back to you. This is a natural law. It's inescapable. There are no loopholes for this process. So for this reason, if you're still trying to process shadows while holding on to a duality framework, you're simply unable to observe the programming that you're looking at objectively, and your results will always be skewed. So it's a lot like picking up chicks in a bar with your beer goggles on. You're always going to regret it in the morning.
So why do we want to be able to release duality?
So duality is always going to color your perception and your results, which is very counterintuitive to the shadow work integration process. Conversely, operating outside of duality provides an objective space to observe, examine, and alter programming for your highest and best good. This is the non-ego-based method, and this is the method that I always recommend. When we use this fifth dimensional approach, we remove the emotional intensity and the duality framework. And this allows us to objectively decide if a program is serving us or not. So as long as your observations, as long as your programming and your thoughts are still being colored, you're not objective, so you can't make an informed decision because you're still being influenced. And with that in mind, it's important to know that some people may choose to keep a seemingly bad program, and that's perfectly okay. That's why it's important for you, if you're prompting, if you're assisting someone in processing shadow integration, it's important for you to remain unattached to the outcomes and operate outside of duality. Because you, as an outside individual, do not get to decide what's best for anyone else. You don't get to choose their path. Only they get to do that. They may make a choice that seems crazy or illogical to everyone else, but in reality, it's exactly what they needed at that time. And you're unable to see that because you are not given all of the information. You are not in their shoes. You are not their higher self. Sometimes small programming changes are needed to provide stepping stones for larger changes later on. And sometimes those small changes may look like steps backwards or things that are counterintuitive. But it's important to remember that it's not your place to decide what's best for any individual.
What is being attached to your outcomes, and how does that affect shadow work?
Attachment creates blockages during the shadow work integration process, and it will seriously inhibit the flow of energy. Whereas unattachment allows the process to unfold in the best manner possible and allows for the best outcome to manifest. Your job as a shadow integration assistant is just to throw the energetic ball. It's not to try to control how, when, and if someone else catches it. We allow the energy to flow through with the intention to heal and provide the best possible outcome for the individual processing the shadow work. This process results in the least amount of pain and struggle during shadow integration, which is what we want. Coloring the process with your hope, belief, or intention that the process proceed in a certain manner or with a particular outcome skews the entire session.
Why do I need to know how to hold space for myself and others during this process?
Holding space is essential to using this fifth density process because we're approaching the issue from a standpoint beyond duality and attachment. In this instance, holding space involves a modified process that allows you to move the programming that you're examining to an energetically neutral space for processing. It provides a safe and secure and loving environment energetically for the entire process to unfold. Some people are prone to self-sabotaging behaviors, and these may present during shadow integrations as distractions that are used to postpone the integration process because the person is experiencing a great deal of fear. Holding space helps mitigate these unhealthy responses and helps prevent or limit self-harming behaviors.
How do I prep for shadow work?
So the process that we teach is affectionately called the pre-flight checklist. It's a list of things that are required to do before you fly energetically. And this process is taught using a pendulum because it provides visual feedback and is really easy for most people to learn. And especially when doing shadow integrations, this process should never be skipped. So this is what our pre-flight checklist looks like, and it's a pretty basic and simple process. You want to make sure that you're connected to your pendulum and that it wants to assist you in whatever endeavors you're doing. Some pendulums, especially crystal pendulums, will volunteer for shadow work and some will not. It's important to stay hydrated, grounded, 100% in your body, fully connected to yourself and your guides. Clear of any fears that might be affecting your ability to process shadow integration. Um, we always make sure that we provide a safe and protected space in order to work. We always make sure that our accuracy with our pendulum is at 100% and that our energetic polarity is flowing correctly. We make sure that we're clear from outside influences before proceeding. And we also want to make sure that we reduce non-beneficial energy in our bodies before we start. This is energy that we pick up from other people and from our environments, and it can create a lot of energetic noise and distraction during the process if it's not cleared beforehand. And as always, we always make sure that you're operating according to your own personal code of ethics that you get to develop for yourself. So the next thing that we want to talk about is hydration. Without proper hydration, the movement of energy during the shadow integration process is always inhibited. I can't stress this enough. You're going to need lots of extra water to integrate any shadows. Now, you already drink a couple gallons of water a day, but when you're processing shadow work, do you find that you need to double that amount?
Depends on the amount of shadow work, but yeah.
Because you're going to be moving so much energy during the shadow integration process, and your body uses hydration as the vehicle to move that energy. So if you're not properly hydrated, you end up with a lot of really nasty results that nobody wants. Insufficient hydration can lead to things like ascension flu symptoms, toxic overload, organ system stress, autoimmune dysfunction, and it really just leads to a whole bunch of physical, mental, and emotional symptoms that no one wants to deal with. So if you think you've drank enough water, go ahead and drink one more glass just to be sure, and you might even want to drink 2 extra glasses. You can always use your pendulum to check to see what your hydration level is before, during, and after a session. And just keep in mind it should always be registering at 100% to avoid any problems.
So I've heard some people talk about pulling out their shadow work forcibly. Is this a good idea?
In my opinion, from my experience, it is never a good idea to force shadow work. Energy work should always be allowed to flow freely during an integration session. It's never advisable to dig out an issue for any reason. If it's ready to be processed, it will be at the surface of your awareness and will be easily retrieved through a consult with the person's higher self. This is done simply by asking for what shadow work is ready to process. And if more than one program presents, we ask to be given the one program that will be most beneficial for the individual's highest and best good at this time. It's important to know that digging for shadow work, forcing it, can create a perverted program in itself where the individual becomes obsessed in a way with poking at their own shadows or the shadows of others. And it can actually advance and become a type of energetic addiction. But during this process, even though they're continuously looking at their shadows, the shadows are never fully integrated and no healing ever takes place. So that's why we only process what's been identified by your higher self as what is in your best interest at this time. We always follow the lead of our higher selves and not the lower self. Your lower self or your ego will provide information that protects you from perceived harm or hurt. It will provide information that makes you look good in the eyes of those assisting you. It will give answers that it thinks are right or what it thinks others want to hear instead of the truth, which is completely counterintuitive to the entire shadow integration process. This can be a major block to clearing and integrating shadows if this process isn't followed.
So what's my overall preparation process again?
So the prep process is pretty simple. You want to develop your intuition, your discernment, and connect to your higher self and guides. We talked about learning to identify victim mentality and releasing duality, being consciously unattached to the outcomes and knowing how to hold space for yourself and others, drinking water, and not forcing the energy.
So, where's a good place to learn more about energy work, shadow integration, or maybe book a shadow work session?
So we have a website. It's called energyhealingworkshops.com, and that's workshops plural. And you can find all your information on there. You can follow us on Facebook. We're on Facebook as Energy Healing Workshops. We have a group, Energy Healing Workshops group, where we teach energy work, shadow work, the basics, and we learn and grow together. There's a group of folks in there, and you can also visit the website to book a shadow work session with me personally. And if you would like to book with Chase, you can also leave that request. He doesn't have a scheduler available, but he does process shadow work with other people as well. And I'd like to thank everyone for watching, and be sure to leave your questions in the comments. I will check those and get those answers to you. And be sure to look for part 2 coming up soon in this 3-part series on processing shadow work. The next installment is going to be called the shadow work process. So thanks for hanging out with us today, and we appreciate you.